I've got the great pleasure of welcoming composer Augusta Reed Thomas, also known as Gusty Thomas. I'll call you Gusty today. And Andrew Nogle, who is the oboe player for what we're going to talk about. Andrew, I'm calling you Andy. So it's the Gusty and Andy show today that we're talking about. This new release, it's the debut album from the Grossman Ensemble. If people don't know, that is the ensemble in residence at the Chicago Center for Contemporary Composition. That's at the University of Chicago. Now, I mentioned, Gusty, that you're a composer. You're a pretty well-known composer in the new music world, but you're also much more than that. You're a real force behind the scenes as well. You founded that Contemporary Composition Center in Chicago. You're also the driving force behind the Grossman Ensemble. It's really exciting that they finally have, this album of music out by composers that you have worked with in such a unique way. You being a composer yourself, tell us a little bit about the Grossman Ensemble and the vision you had for this group of 13 musicians.
Well, first of all, Brad, thank you so much for having Andy and I on your show. We greatly appreciate your time and just letting us share a little bit about this recording we made. The Chicago Center for Contemporary Composition is one of many projects I've done. I try to spend quite a bit of time in short, helping other people or building festivals, building centers, chairing boards, putting together commissions for other composers or projects for performers and recordings of other people's music, whatever it might be, because I think it's important in life to give back and to support this art form that I love so dearly. So it's really a great privilege. And one of the many projects I've done over 30 years is to found this center at the University of Chicago. And one part of that is the Grossman Ensemble. I'll just say a few words about the Grossman Ensemble, and then I'll hand it over to Andy. It's, first of all, made up of the most incredible artists who play with grace, excellence, technical prowess, finesse, care, deep musicality, deep listening, precision, really like great artists. And this is absolutely important and inspiring. Then what we do is we invite 12 composers a year for a commission, and we run them through the Grossman Ensemble process, which is where the composer starts with a sketch or a fragment or 3 fragments, and we workshop it for them. And then 3 weeks later, they come back, and we do it again. And they change it, they throw things out, restart, abandon, go deeper with this idea, and so forth. Then 3 weeks later, we do it again. And then 3 weeks later, we do it again. And then we do a recording session and the concert. So it's very much about the process as well as the product. And this is important because composers don't often get that kind of process with a large ensemble. You might get it with a duo or a trio, but to be able to work on a piece over so much time and have every single musician at every rehearsal, and these are musicians that want to collaborate, that will give good advice, like, let's try it this way, or it'll sound better this way, or how about we try that? And so, everybody's piece gets better through this process.
Wonderful. It seems like a really creative atmosphere that you have created there in Chicago. Andy, let's hear from you. You're an acclaimed oboist. You play with Ensemble Dal Niente. I've played your music on the radio before, and you have a long history of working with living composers. What was your experience with Grossman Ensemble, and how did you become a member of this group?
Well, I was invited to play oboe in the Grossman Ensemble, I think about 3 years ago when the plans were just starting to form. And we played our first concerts together in October of 2018. And my experience with the Grossman Ensemble has been one of kind of wonder and imagination and creativity, unlike any other group I've ever been a part of before, because certain of the composers come to us with pieces that basically look and sound fully formed, and a couple of those are provided on the album. And those pieces just required kind of nuance and editing in the process of rehearsing them over the course of 10 weeks. But other pieces come to us as sketches on a page. And by sketches, I really mean the composer might have just written out, make a sound that resembles this, or give me a loud sound, or an aggressive sound, or a raunchy sound. And a couple of those pieces got on the album too. And those pieces required fleshing out of a type that is not often allowed to a composer. They're not often given this opportunity to design a piece alongside the performers who will be playing it. So even though I have a 15-year career of playing primarily contemporary music, I'm often just given the piece and told, you're going to play this piece. And I have to play it as it is. And there's no amount of negotiating with the composer, no amount of going back and forth with the composer to tell them, I like this, do more of this. Or one of the pieces on our album, actually, I had to go back and forth with the composer because he used a lot of F flat and E flat and G flat and A natural all in the same passage. And I said, I need this to be spelled differently so that my eyes don't get crossed as I'm trying to read it. So we went back and forth. That was David Zube, wonderful composer, great guy. He wanted to make things as playable as possible. So my experience in the Grossman Ensemble has been unusual in how much freedom and creativity it allows me, but it's also very much a part of what is my priority as a performer, which is to generate beautiful, interesting, and exciting things to put out into the world.
Well, I want to talk about some of the music on the album and the composers that you've gathered together under this umbrella of your debut album. You mentioned David Zube. We may as well talk about his piece, Faux. Can you give us a little background on that work?
So playing David Zube's piece, Pho, P-H-O, was a real treat because he was also the conductor for that performance. So this was the first time the Grossman Ensemble worked with a composer-conductor who had a very clear idea from the beginning what his piece should sound like. And that meant that the rehearsals were really focused and really direct, and he really had clear ideas for us for this extraordinarily challenging piece. I consider it kind of a concerto for Grossman Ensemble because everyone has such virtuosic stuff to do in the piece. There's a lot of unison writing, which was really tough to coordinate across the ensemble, and intonation was always a battle we had to fight in this piece as well. But I think blending the sounds of these beautiful instruments together was really worth it because David's piece generates a tremendous amount of excitement and danger. The piece is about, I think it's about cosmic objects in orbit that could potentially crash into the Earth. So there's this sense of impending doom, of dread, of menace in the piece, which may be relatively common in new music to hear this idea, but the way David accomplishes it is, I think, really poetic. It has a really strong sense of narrative and of rondo form. The piece has dance-like, I think, kind of ballet elements in it. I would love to see this piece choreographed, honestly. I'm speaking totally off the record there. I don't know if David has that idea at all, but I think the piece has this kind of swirling, churning, twirling energy that is really exciting to get swept up into.
One of the things I notice about the different works on this album, which is called Fountain of Time, by the way, and we'll talk about that title in a moment, but the way that all these composers, I mean, they all were writing these works for the Grossman Ensemble, the delicacy of timbre, the way that timbre is so, there's such a variety of sounds from these 13 different instruments throughout the piece. I wonder, Gusty, if you can talk a little bit about choosing, assembling these works, bringing them to, this new recording. Talk a little bit about some of the other composers and how you put together this particular album.
One of the most fun things about this project is that I get to go to every rehearsal. I've literally been at every rehearsal. I missed one. And these are like full days of rehearsal. I haven't yet written for the Grossman Ensemble, but I've really enjoyed this process because I get to hear all my friends play with such eloquence and so many colors and facets and kinds of sound objects that are colliding or contrapuntal or block-like sounds, and really to zoom my head into someone else's piece over and over and over and over again until we get to the final project. It's one that's very illuminating, and I feel that I've never come home from a Grossman Ensemble rehearsal without having learned something, in particular from the performers and also from the composers. I think one of the things that's very special about the ensemble is that we don't have a music director. We don't have a conductor. The idea here is that every musician who's part of this ensemble is a member. You don't send subs. It's not like a roster. Maybe we'll pick you this time. Maybe we'll pick the other person next time. It's not like that. It's like we are a team. We're going to play together. We're going to make art together. We're going to have lunch together. And, everybody's like really on this team. And we therefore really focus on the musicians and the composers in a way, and invite a conductor to come in and join us and be equally collaborative and open-minded and flexible, rather than having somebody who's in charge and telling everyone, take it from letter B and you're too loud and you're too soft. That's exactly what we didn't want. And we've had the chance to work with such great conductors that get this spirit. But when you set up an environment like that, where really it's composer and musician led in equal measure, and I like to set things up where everybody has complete agency. Like, I don't want to be the boss. I just want to facilitate this. And let's all get in there and we're all good at what we do. I get the best people and then let's let them do their magic. And that's what happens at these rehearsals. These are just amazing artists. So on the recording, you really get a sense of that. The individual performers, the way they're able to play together, the diversity of composers. We put 4 different kinds of composers on each concert on purpose so that the works in a way talk to each other. And we've so far commissioned 36 pieces, which relative to our timeline is an enormous amount to have done. Because of COVID, we've only premiered 20 of those, and then this recording represents only 5 of those. But we worked hard to pick a cross-section from our 20 world premieres that we've done that represented that kind of diversity of sound, form, scope, flow, and aesthetic.
Tell us what the title of the album itself is about, Fountains of Time, because it's not a track on the piece. What is the inspiration for that title?
Well, I was one of the musicians who came up with the title for the album, and it really has its origin in a camping trip that I recently took, if you'll believe it. This summer, due to COVID-19, I've become a camper, since it's, we're told, one of the safest summertime activities to participate in during this pandemic. And in northwestern Illinois, there's a state park, Loudon State Park, over which a giant statue towers, and it's a reinforced concrete sculpture representing the spirit of the Native American people. And so it's this large, he's known often as the Black Hawk statue, but this is a piece by a Chicago sculptor named Lorado Taft. And Lorado Taft also designed a sculpture that is found on the eastern end of Washington Park in Chicago, which happens to be located just a couple blocks from the venue where the Grossman Ensemble performs. Now, the sculpture at Washington Park is called Fountain of Time, or sometimes just Time, but it depicts about 100 figures processing past Father Time. And one of the figures that Lorado Taft sculpted is, in fact, a self-portrait. He sculpted himself as part of this work. It's a massive concrete sculpture. And so I was thinking about the inclusion of the artist among his subjects and the artist within his own work. And I thought there was something really beautifully reflective of the Grossman Ensemble's process in that idea. And I also loved the idea that we would be paying tribute to a local landmark, a local piece of public art that exists within the neighborhood where we do our work together. and Lorado Taft was a Chicago creator, and he might not be so well known outside of Illinois and outside Chicago, but I have these two now powerful and beautiful connections to his work, and I wanted to pay tribute to that with the title of our album.
It's such a fascinating story. Let me ask you, are you taking the oboe on those camping trips, or you leave it at home?
I haven't taken my oboe to the campgrounds yet. I was thinking about it. I'm going again tomorrow, actually, and I might I might bring it along.
I've seen some of your videos on your Facebook page, so I'll look for some camping oboe videos.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, please do.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about one or two of the other works that are on here. I mean, we talked about the David Subaya piece. You've also got Shulamit Ron, who is, a fantastic composer, somebody who is known by just about everybody. And that opens the album, a piece called Grand Rounds, which she wrote for you during your first couple of seasons. Can we talk a little bit about that piece?
I would be delighted to. Shulamit's piece, Grand Rounds, is extremely musical. One has the sense that every note is intentionalized and focused and part of several sets of decisions, harmonic and rhythmic and contrapuntal and timbral and so on. It's a beautifully formed piece in terms of its shape and the way it develops and ebbs and flows and ends. It's eloquent. It's very Shulamit, which I love. You can hear her voice in it. She often will do music that, in a way, features a line and elaborates out of a line, and in a very personal and special way, some kind of line like this, and all sorts of things, harmonic and contrapuntal, will spin out of it. It's got her fingerprints all over it. It's totally an honest piece. It's clean, crystal clear. And we all loved the process with her, and we all love her. So we were very delighted to be able to include her piece on this first recording.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And we got to hear your singing voice, too, which is an added bonus, I might add.
I wouldn't even cut that part out.
No, it's great. It's great. And the enthusiasm that you have for this music and these performers is obvious when you talk about it. I really appreciate your making the time. Let's talk just a little bit about COVID-19, how it's affected you. Andy, you were talking about, going on camping trips. I know this has been devastating for so many musicians across the board, but in some ways it's also opened up new channels, new opportunities. Things are changing. Hopefully, organizations like Grossman Ensemble can be a catalyst for positive change in some ways. Do you want to address that issue a little bit?
Well, what I was going to say is that it's been imperative during this time for musicians to find new ways to connect with each other and with audiences. And so in the past 6 months, I've learned about a bunch of technology that I had been putting off learning. Digital recording at home and video recording at home and teaching over Zoom. Those have all been real challenges for me, sometimes with a steep learning curve, honestly, to be my own producer, recording engineer, videographer, while I'm also playing the oboe, which is not known to be a simple instrument to play. It's been really stressful, but I've had some good opportunities to keep playing. I generated my own project of daily improvisations for the first 75 days of the quarantine when I had no idea how long it would last. I thought I might end up with 25 or 30 videos and then the lockdown would be lifted. But I ended the project at 75 because I felt I was hitting a wall a little bit. But every day I recorded a 2 to 5 minute oboe solo on social media, and that got a lot of attention, and I think I built an audience, and I think people appreciated having live music as part of their day, even during a time it's not possible to go to live concerts. I was also given the opportunity to record a new solo piece that was written for me as part of a micro commissioning project from the Library of Congress that was called the Boccaccio Project. And Daniel Pesca, the pianist from Grossman Ensemble, and I were both given that opportunity. So I recorded a new piece by Richard Dreyhoff Jr., and Daniel Pesca recorded a piece by Aaron Travers, which were generated very quickly. The composers had about 3 weeks to write their new solo pieces, and then we had about 10 days to learn them and record them for public live stream on the Library of Congress's website. So that was the kind of thing I never would have imagined doing before COVID-19. It would never be my preference to learn a solo piece that was very, very challenging in just over a week's time and then have it go out into the world. But I'm so happy that I did that. And honestly, I think what COVID-19 has done for me longer term has been made me a little bit less of a perfectionist, honestly. Classical musicians have this reputation for wanting only what is perfect and absolutely solid to go out into the world, kind of at the expense of putting things out into the world, which is not to say that I'm ever going to be sloppy or let my training fail me or let an album go out that I'm not happy with. But this time of isolation has revealed to me that it is much more important for me to be doing it and to be making music happen in the world than for everything I do to be immaculately clean and perfect and heavily edited. And I've kind of reevaluated my priorities. And for me, it's more important to be playing music than it is to be playing music 100% perfectly all the time, if that makes sense regarding this weird time we're all in.
It makes complete sense. And it's not just creating art and trying to reach a certain level in the creation of it. It's also the idea that so many people are involved in this together. It's a unifying force. And I think that, like you say, it's not as important that we turn out something that is absolutely perfect, you know, the way that you normally would strive for in the old environment. Nowadays, it's more about making art and kind of revealing yourself at the most intimate level. And that's why I think conversations like this are definitely worthwhile. Gusty, can you talk a little bit about how the pandemic has been affecting you? I mean, I've talked with a lot of composers recently who have talked about, you know, canceled projects or postponed projects, and they have continued to compose because they can stay in one place and create something, you know, at home under quarantine. But you're also involved, of course, in a lot of other things as well, including the Center for Contemporary Composition and the Grossman Ensemble. So how has this pandemic affected what you do?
Well, thanks for asking, Brad. I was thinking so much about such a long history of racism and discrimination, and the murder of George Floyd and many, many, many others is profoundly, deeply affecting all of us. And I do want to say right now that Brown Lives Matter and Black Lives Matter. I want to say that very, very loudly. And so when you ask about the pandemic of COVID, I think of it as, you know, another pandemic on top of a deeper pandemic. And then on top of that, I think we have another pandemic, which is terrible political leadership, if I might say so, in our country. And so there's so many layers to this. And I'm very mindful of all my friends, the people I'm trying so hard to support for 30 years. You know, people are out of work. People don't have jobs or something to do, and it's hard to keep moving forward. And I want to make sure people have what they need in terms of food and shelter and this kind of thing. It's very hard to lose all your work. And so I'm just very mindful of everybody. And I wish I could wave a wand or like win the lottery or like something, just do something to help everybody. And so that's really the way I feel. It's very deep, like a deep hurt of some kind. On the other hand, with all of that sensitivity, on the other hand, what a composer really wants is time to sit at home and write music. So to a certain extent, for composers or poets or anybody creating things, that the amount of time that one suddenly has is really a boon. And so it's really this kind of interesting balance. And I feel fortunate for that time because typically I travel every single week. For like 30 years, I've been traveling every week, and all of a sudden it just stopped. And I serve on lots of boards, and we're doing all those remotely. And so all of a sudden, the amount of time I spend traveling and packing and unpacking my suitcase has stopped. For instance, I used to never, ever, ever unpack my suitcase. I would just do the laundry and put it back. And then like 2 days later, I would leave. And so I just had a room with the open suitcase, and I had like shoes that travel, and I had a toothbrush that travels, and I had it all planned out. Well, finally, I put the suitcase away. I was just like, okay, here we go. I'm going to put this thing away. And it hasn't been away in, 20 years. So it's just like this whole other mindset that you have to get used to. I will say I've been very, very creative. I've been working a lot in terms of trying to support others in creative ways, but also creating new music. And I feel very fortunate for the opportunity to do that and to be healthy and to have time and, frankly, to have commissions. To be blunt, it's nice that I had projects because some composers have no projects. I just feel very lucky. Wonderful.
And so well stated about, these dangerous, difficult times that everybody is going through. So many things happening, and there in Chicago, a lot of things going on as well. But art perseveres. It changes. We're at the cusp of something different. But I am hopeful, as I'm sure that you are both hopeful, that we can create something positive out of this. Certainly, one positive thing is the new recording from the Grossman Ensemble that we've been talking about today.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah.
In imagining the Grossman Ensemble and these unbelievable artists and these composers and all the teammates that are making this possible, very generous donors who partnered with us, and every layer of the project, one realizes how important it is to have excellent recording engineering. And we document every single rehearsal with a recording. We run tape the whole time. So if the composer says, can you try this little thing? And we do it, we grab it on tape. We're not turning the microphones on and off. And I did want to take a second to celebrate our recording engineer, Christopher L. Willis, who, by the way, already has won 4 Grammys. He's got a shelf with 4 of them for excellence in recording of classical music. He's an absolute superstar. And we recorded this album with so many microphones and lots of careful editing. And I am just, the cheerleader for this album, but I would like to say that the sound image, in addition to the performing, in addition to the composing, is really, really great. And it's no wonder that Chris already has 4 Grammys, and that we have him on our team is something we're very, very proud of. And he's been with us from day one. He was in the first round of phone calls, and this is one of his favorite projects.
That's fantastic. I mean, the engineers are often the unsung heroes of projects like this, so it's great that you were talking about him a little bit. The album is called Fountain of Time. It is from the Grossman Ensemble at the Chicago Center for Contemporary Composition at the University of Chicago. Augusta Reed Thomas, the founder and director of that ensemble, as well as oboist Andrew Nogle, who is one of the members of the ensemble. I want to thank both of you for talking with us today about this new album and many, many things that we've discussed. My appreciation goes out to both of you. And Gusty Thomas, we're going to see you as the composer in residence in Bowling Green this October, so we look forward to that.
Well, thanks so much, Brad, for having us. Such a pleasure to be with you and Andy today, and I'm super excited to be back with you all very soon with the Bowling Green Festival.